So this time around, we're going small, really small.
Okay.
Like
Right.
atoms small.
Atoms, yeah.
Artificial atoms.
Artificial atoms.
Yeah, and I'm not gonna lie, when this request came in,
Hmm.
I was a little intimidated.
Yeah,
It can be pretty dense.
we're talking about, like, the fundamental building blocks of matter here.
Right, exactly.
But the idea that we can create these
Yes.
things
Yeah.
artificially just blew my mind. So
It's incredible, yeah.
I knew we had to dive in. And luckily, we've got our expert here
Yeah.
who eats quantum mechanics for breakfast.
I don't know about that, but I do find this stuff pretty fascinating.
Yeah, so.
It's remarkable, we can essentially build these tiny structures
Yeah.
that behave just like the atoms on the periodic table,
Wow.
but a million times smaller.
Wow, that is.
They exhibit amazing similar energy levels and interactions, and it all comes down to the laws of quantum mechanics that govern the nanoscale.
Okay, so before we go too far down the rabbit hole here, can we just back up for a second?
Sure.
And define what exactly is an artificial atom? Because I have to admit, I'm picturing something like out of Star Trek, all glowy and futuristic.
Right, well, it's not quite as visually dramatic as that, but the science is definitely exciting.
Okay.
In the simplest terms, an artificial atom is a tiny, precisely engineered structure, usually made of semiconductor materials.
Okay.
Think of it like a tiny dot of material so small you'd need a super powerful microscope to even see it.
Okay, so we're not building tiny solar systems here.
Right.
No, not quite. But you said that these things actually behave like atoms.
Right.
How is that even possible?
That's a great question. And it all comes down to a concept called quantum confinement. Have you ever, played guitar or seen someone play?
Yeah. You pluck a string, and it can only vibrate at certain frequencies.
Yeah.
To create specific notes.
Mm-hmm.
Imagine that same principle applied to electrons inside an artificial atom.
Okay.
Because these structures are so incredibly small, the electrons are confined, their movement is restricted.
Yeah.
And this leads to what we call quantized energy levels, just like in natural atoms.
So it's like the size of the box the electrons are in determines how they can move and what energy they can have.
Exactly. You got it.
Okay, that's pretty mind-blowing. But hold on.
Mm-hmm.
How do scientists actually make these incredibly tiny atoms? I can barely, fold a fitted sheet, let alone manipulate matter on an atomic level.
Right. So it definitely requires an incredible level of precision and some really advanced technology.
Okay.
There are basically two main approaches, top-down and bottom-up.
Uh-huh.
The top-down approach is sort of like high-tech sculpting. Imagine using incredibly focused beams of light or electrons to carve out patterns.
Yeah.
On surface, creating these tiny dots with atomic-level precision.
So it's like using a super tiny chisel to create these structures.
Yeah, that's a great analogy.
But the research also mentions something called bottom-up self-assembly. It sounds almost like these nanoparticles have a mind of their own and they just assemble themselves into these structures.
In a way, they kind of do.
Wow.
In self-assembly, nanoparticles act like tiny building blocks that arrange themselves into these quantum dot structures, almost like a self-solving puzzle,
So we can either build these artificial atoms from the top down, or we can let nature kind of help us out and assemble them from the bottom up.
Yeah, exactly.
That's incredible.
That's pretty remarkable.
But I guess the big question is what's the point?
Right.
Why go through all this trouble to create these artificial atoms? What makes them so special?
That's where it gets really interesting.
Okay.
The beauty of both of these approaches is that we can control the size and the material of these artificial atoms. We can essentially tune their properties.
So it's like having a set of knobs that let you dial in exactly the electronic and optical behavior that you want.
Exactly.
Okay, that sounds incredibly powerful. But before we dive into specific applications, there's one concept from the research that I need your help unpacking.
Yeah.
And that's this idea of the Coulomb blockade.
Ah, yes. The Coulomb blockade.
It sounds kind of intimidating.
It's a key phenomenon that arises from the small size of these artificial atoms. Think of it like a tiny gatekeeper that controls the flow of electrons.
Okay.
Because these artificial atoms are so small, it takes a significant amount of energy to add even a single electron.
So it's like there's an energy barrier that electrons have to overcome to enter the artificial atom.
Precisely.
Okay.
And because of this barrier, current can only flow in these discrete steps, one electron at a time. And this is what we call quantized conductance.
Mm-hmm.
And this is the basis for single-electron transistors, or SETs.
Okay, hold on.
Did you just say we can control electricity at the level of individual electrons?
That sounds like something straight out of, like, a science fiction novel.
It might sound futuristic, but it's very much a reality in the realm of artificial atoms.
That's mind-boggling.
The Coulomb blockade
Wow.
allows us to actually manipulate and measure individual electrons. And this opens the door to incredibly sensitive sensors and ultra-low power electronics.
So we've got these tiny tunable atoms that act like miniature electronic components. But what happens when we bring multiple artificial atoms together? The research mentioned something called coupled quantum dots. Do they, like, start interacting with each other?
Absolutely, and that's where things get even more intriguing. It's like a quantum party with all these artificial atoms mingling and influencing each other.
I like that, a quantum party.
Yeah.
But the research also mentioned something even more mysterious, quantum entanglement.
Right.
What is that all about? It sounds like something straight out of a science fiction movie.
It kind of is. Quantum entanglement is one of the strangest and most fascinating phenomena in quantum mechanics. When two quantum dots become entangled, their fates are intertwined, no matter how far apart they are. It's like they're linked by this invisible thread.
Okay.
And measuring the state of one instantly affects the state of the other.
Whoa, that is mind-bending. It's
Right.
like they have this spooky connection that defies, our everyday understanding of distance and interaction.
Yeah, exactly.
But why is this entanglement so important? Like, what does it allow us to do?
Well, entanglement is a key ingredient for a lot of potential applications of artificial atoms, particularly in quantum computing.
Okay.
Imagine using entangled quantum dots to perform calculations in parallel, exponentially increasing computing power.
So it's like having millions of tiny computers all working together simultaneously.
Yeah, that's a good way to put it.
That's incredible. So these coupled quantum dots aren't just a scientific curiosity. They have the potential to revolutionize the way we process information.
Exactly.
But the research also mentioned other exciting applications, like in optoelectronics and photonics. Can you shed some light on that for us?
Oh, I see what you did there. But yeah, artificial atoms are incredibly versatile when it comes to light. By changing their size and composition, we can actually control the color of light they emit or absorb. This makes them ideal for applications like LEDs, lasers, and even more efficient solar cells.
So instead of relying on traditional light sources, we could use artificial atoms to create light in a more controlled and energy-efficient way.
Exactly.
Wow, okay, I'm definitely seeing the light now, both literally and figuratively. But the research also mentioned applications in biosensing and medical imaging. How can these tiny artificial atoms be used to explore the world of biology and medicine?
Well, think of artificial atoms as like tiny beacons that can be attached to biomolecules,
Okay.
like proteins or DNA.
Okay.
And when these biomolecules interact within a cell, the artificial atoms emit light, allowing us to track their movement and interactions in real time.
So it's like having microscopic spies that report back on the inner workings of cells.
That's a great analogy.
That's incredible. What kind of information can we gain from this?
Well, we can learn about how cells communicate, how diseases progress, and even how drugs interact with their targets.
Okay.
And this knowledge can lead to new diagnostic tools, more effective treatments, and a deeper understanding of life itself.
Wow. The potential applications just keep getting more and more impressive. But let's shift gears for a moment and talk about challenges. The research mentioned that maintaining the unique properties of these artificial atoms at higher temperatures can be a hurdle.
Right.
Why is that?
Well, as the temperature increases, the atoms within these tiny structures start to vibrate more vigorously. It's kind of like a microscopic mosh pit.
Okay.
And this can disrupt the delicate quantum effects that make artificial atoms so special, leading to a loss of their unique properties.
So it's like trying to perform a delicate surgery in the middle of an earthquake.
Yeah, that's a great analogy.
So overcoming this temperature sensitivity is a major focus for researchers, right? They're exploring ways to stabilize artificial atoms, maybe using more robust materials, or optimizing their design and finding ways to shield them from these thermal fluctuations.
Exactly.
Okay, it sounds like a formidable challenge, but one that scientists are actively tackling. But let's take this idea of complexity a step further.
Okay.
We've talked about individual artificial atoms and coupled quantum dots, but the research also hinted at building even larger and more intricate structures.
Right.
Can you elaborate on that a little bit?
Yeah, so we are indeed moving beyond individual atoms and small clusters. Researchers are now exploring ways to assemble these tiny building blocks into larger, more complex structures, like artificial molecules and lattices.
Okay, so instead of just having a few quantum dots interacting,
Yeah.
we're talking about creating organized networks of these artificial atoms.
Exactly.
Wow, what kind of structures are we talking about? What are the implications?
Well, one really exciting area is the creation of artificial crystals,
Okay.
where quantum dots are arranged in a repeating pattern like atoms in a natural crystal. Okay. And by carefully controlling the arrangement and spacing of the dots, we can engineer materials with entirely new electronic and optical properties.
It sounds like we're moving from mimicking nature to designing our own materials from the ground up.
Exactly.
That's an incredible level of control.
It is.
Are there any real-world examples of these larger structures being created?
There are, actually. One really remarkable example is the development of artificial graphene.
Okay, I've heard of graphene. It's often touted as this wonder material
Yeah.
with countless potential applications.
Right, exactly.
But how can we create an artificial version of it using quantum dots?
Well, researchers have managed to arrange quantum dots in a similar honeycomb lattice, effectively mimicking the structure of graphene.
Okay.
And here's the really cool part.
Yeah.
By using quantum dots, we can actually tune the properties of this artificial graphene in ways that aren't possible with natural graphene.
So we can create a sort of super graphene with enhanced or even entirely new properties. That's mind-blowing. But building these larger, more complex structures must come with its own set of challenges.
Of course. As we move toward larger assemblies of artificial atoms, maintaining control and coherence becomes increasingly difficult.
Right.
It's kind of like trying to conduct an orchestra of millions of tiny instruments,
Okay.
making sure they all play in harmony.
That's a fantastic analogy. So how are researchers approaching this challenge? What tools and techniques are they using?
Well, they're drawing inspiration and techniques from various fields,
Uh-huh.
including condensed matter, physics, material science, and nanotechnology.
Okay.
For example, they're using concepts like band theory, which describes how electrons behave in solids, to design artificial lattices with specific electronic properties.
So it's like taking the principles we've learned from studying large-scale materials and applying them to these tiny artificial systems.
Exactly. And that's just the tip of the iceberg. As we gain a deeper understanding of how to control and manipulate these artificial systems at increasingly larger scales, who knows what incredible discoveries and technologies await us.
Okay, I think my brain needs a moment to process all of this. We've covered a lot of ground, from individual artificial atoms to building complex structures like artificial graphene. It's clear that this field has enormous potential to reshape our world.
Yeah.
It really does. Well, I'm certainly eager to see where it all leads, but before we wrap things up, I want to leave our listener with a final thought-provoking question. We've talked about artificial atoms mimicking natural atoms and even building artificial crystals. But what about going beyond mimicking? Could we use artificial atoms to create entirely new forms of matter with properties that defy our current understanding of physics?
It's a fascinating and deeply profound question. Yeah, it really is like asking if we could become architects of a whole new periodic table, one built not on the elements of nature, but on these artificial building blocks we're creating.
It's an incredible thought.
It is.
What's the most exciting possibility that comes to mind for you?
Well, what fascinates me is the potential to create materials with properties that we've always considered impossible.
Yeah.
Like, imagine a material with zero electrical resistance at room temperature, leading to lossless energy transmission, or devices that operate with unprecedented efficiency, or maybe materials with completely novel optical properties interacting with light in ways we've never observed before.
It's like we're on the cusp of a materials revolution, where the limitations of natural materials no longer constrain us.
Exactly.
But with these new possibilities also come new questions and challenges. Are there any ethical considerations we need to keep in mind as we delve deeper into this realm of artificial atoms?
Absolutely. As with any powerful technology, it's crucial to consider the potential implications, both positive and negative. We need to ensure responsible development and application of these materials, addressing potential environmental impacts, safety concerns, and the societal implications of such transformative technologies.
It's a reminder that scientific progress always needs to be guided by ethical considerations. We don't want to create a future where these incredible advancements create more problems than they solve.
Right, exactly.
So open dialogue and collaboration between scientists, ethicists, policymakers, and the public is going to be essential to ensure that these technologies are used for the benefit of humanity.
Couldn't agree more.
Well, it's clear that artificial atoms are not just a scientific curiosity. They represent a fundamental shift in our ability to control and manipulate matter at its most basic level. And as with any powerful tool, we need to wield it with wisdom and foresight.
Absolutely.
Well, on that inspiring note, I think it's time to wrap up this deep dive into the world of artificial atoms. We've journeyed from the basics of quantum confinement to the mind-boggling potential of creating entirely new forms of matter.
It's been quite a journey.
We've explored the incredible possibilities, but also acknowledged the importance of responsible innovation. To our listener, we encourage you to continue exploring this topic. Delve deeper into the research, stay curious, and who knows, maybe you'll be the one to make the next groundbreaking discovery in this extraordinary field.
The future of artificial atoms is bright, and I have no doubt it'll be filled with surprises.
Until next time, keep diving deep.